Welcome back to WagerTalk.com. Marco D'Angelo joined in studio. Bryan Leonard going to recap the first 2 rounds of the NCAA tournament. I know officially it's 3 rounds in the books because they count the play-ins as a round, but I'm old school. It's 2 rounds. We're now at the Sweet 16. Hey, it's my video. I can do what I want.
Say
right?
what you want.
That's it. Bryan, there is a writer for ESPN, and if you love to just follow the gambling news, you know, how much money's being bet, what the books are winning in that, a lot of people quote him but never give him credit for it. David Purdom writes excellent stuff for ESPN, and he's keeping you abreast to the pulse of the gambling scene in Vegas, and I just love the fact that ESPN's opening up more and recognizing that people actually gamble on these games. But can you believe it?
Well, once Chad Millman got signed, and Chad has a background he wrote about in his book, which, oh man, he's going to kill me. I can't remember the name of his book. So now that he's the editor of the magazine, and ESPN Chalk is basically the gambling page on that site. You know, Dave Tooley, one of our friends here in Las Vegas, writes for them now. So a lot of great information.
Yeah, and everybody loves to hear the stories about big exposures to, you know, certain future bets and different things. And while some people, we won't mention people's names, love to tweet out useless stats of, you know, 25 favorites, 1 in a row, and, you know.
It's a cluster luck.
Yeah, and stuff that does absolutely no good. This is a city based on point spreads. Nobody cares about that or the odds of a bracket. We're here to talk about actionable things that you can bet. But one of the things that's really interesting, CG Technologies, when the brackets came out, they readjusted their odds for to win the national championship. Now everybody knows that Kentucky is the odds-on favorite, you know, to win. And although the books have some exposure there, they've got some big exposure with one team. NC State took a lot of action. NC State took 6 bets at CG Technologies for $200 or more, and they opened them up at 250 to 1 when the brackets first came out. But that's a small number compared to over at the Superbook. They're going to do a little sweating. I think they might be rooting hard for Louisville on Friday night. I think they play against NC State, but 2,000 to 1 back mid-season when NC State lost to Wake Forest. They were 14-11 on the season. Probably not even going to make the big dance. So they were sitting on the board at 2,000 to 1, and they took a $300 bet on NC State at 2,000 to 1. And now that they're in the Sweet 16, I know if I'm holding that ticket, I'm hedging. I'm down there hedging big time on a $300 ticket that's, you know, sitting there at that kind of value. And they're catching a break because they upset Villanova, so now they're playing Louisville. They're only a 3.5-point underdog. So if you want to hedge on Louisville, you're not going to pay an astronomical price tag to do so to get to the Elite Eight.
Just play them on the money line.
You know,
I mean,
yeah,
it's
absolutely.
a valuable money line. Yeah, when NC State loses to Wake Forest, I would not have been betting on NC State at that point. And you run into this all the time. Obviously, Ohio State in the football championship, once the quarterback went out, the line, you know, went crazy, and there were some people who was able to make some money on that. But that's part of playing the futures. You take a shot on these teams, and I'm sure he didn't expect them to win the championship. He just wanted them to get probably to this round where he can do some nice hedging. But that's the way to do it. But yeah, there's a lot of people that go out there and play these. We'll hear once in a while if somebody got that 2,000 to 1. We never hear about the teams that laid 3 to 1 and didn't even make it past the Sweet 16.
One of the other things, and we made fun of, you know, the big news of all those favorites, you know, winning their games. Well, here's a news flash: they were a favorite. They're supposed to win those games.
Yeah.
You know, and a lot of them were double-digit favorites and supposed to win. On Thursday, though, was a great day for the sports books. Even though there was a lot of upsets, there were a lot of close games. In MGM, David Purdom reported MGM was on, the house was on the right side of 14 of the 16 games on Thursday. great way to start the tournament for the sports book. So even with all those favorites winning, you know, it all comes down to one thing. It's not who wins, it's by how much. And speaking of how much, if you watch and we did the video last week on Notre Dame and Butler, and although Notre Dame got it to overtime and you had a favorite minus points in overtime, you didn't have the right side.
Didn't deserve it.
Yeah. They did have an opportunity to cover it in overtime. They were up 5, laying 4.5 when Butler slam dunked, you know, basically at the buzzer. It was, I think, at 1 point something left on the clock after the slam dunk to cut it to 3. That slam dunk was a 7-figure flip-flop for the sports books, in the sports books' favor, because Notre Dame was taking the money on that game. So it's amazing when you're sitting there, and if you've never been to a sports book in Vegas, I mean, every time one team scores, you know, you got half of the room cheering, the other team scores, the other half. Well, because it was the final play of the game, and it was the point spread, there were a lot of yays and a lot of no's, but mostly no's, because Notre Dame was the heavy bet side. So,
But, well, the same thing happened in the Georgetown game, that late game, where they had a breakaway stuff at the last play to cover. But Georgetown deserved to win that game all along.
yeah. I want to say again, shout out to David Purdom for writing these articles. He's a great follow on Twitter. Look him up, David Purdom, and check out his articles at ESPN. Doesn't get enough credit for the stuff he writes. All of his stuff gets out there, but he doesn't get credit for it.
Let's just say there's some people out there that don't give credit where credit is due. I mean, we just talked about some books, talked about some websites.
Yeah.
We don't have a problem with that. If you're putting in the work, I want to see it, and if I'm going to use it, you should get the credit for it.
Absolutely. All right, I hope you enjoyed this little behind the scenes of what's happening with the first 2 rounds of the NCAA tournament. He's Bryan Leonard and Marco D'Angelo. We'll be back next week. WagerTalk.com.